Thank you again for joining in, sir. My first question to you is, how do you assess the overall outcome of these 40 days of war between US, Israel, and Iran?
I think I think it's really challenging to make an assessment, and it's almost something that we're going to need time. And I think importantly, at the moment, there is so much in sort of flux, and there's so much fluidity at the moment in terms of the situation. It's hard to see um, anything other than a challenging situation for all parties, because I don't think any party is coming out of here in a position that they would perhaps have wished to or have foreseen.
Absolutely, sir. And in your opinion, who holds the strategic advantage at this point? Has anyone really won?
I don't think there's any winner in this, and I don't think that there is a strategic advantage. I think there is a really challenging situation that's building up around the Strait of Hormuz. And I think probably the most important thing here is that where perhaps Iran or the US will be positioning their narrative, the most important thing to remember is that there is an entire community of merchant vessels, the organisations that operate them, the masters and the crews who actually are perhaps the unheard voice. And so I think to a certain extent, there's no strategic position of advantage here. I think there is going to be what perhaps is commercially driven, and it's driven by the appetite for risk of the owners and the operators of these merchant vessels. So there's sort of like there's an unheard voice in all of this.
Right, sir. And the US claims that it has achieved all its military objectives. What do you have to say on this, sir? What has the US specifically achieved in this conflict?
So I think you have to sort of divide. We've seen a lot of flux and fluidity and question of what the objectives are, but I think the chair of the chief the head of the Joint Chief Staffs has been actually quite clear on what the military objectives are. And so what we have seen is we've seen a degradation of Iranians' capability to project maritime force beyond the Gulf. I think we've seen a degradation of their ability to project force within the Gulf. And so you could say that there's been a tangible impact on Iran's ability to both deploy force now, but also deploy force in the future as well, because they've also struck the infrastructure. So from a military perspective, I think it's been an overwhelming success if you're looking at their ability to project power.
Right, sir. And the US president claims that he is disappointed by the NATO. So where does NATO stand
Mm.
after this? Strengthened, divided, or sidelined?
I think I certainly think that NATO's been really clear that it remains a defensive. It is a defensive alliance, and its focus is quite naturally the North Atlantic area and Europe, and so they're very clear in what the objectives of NATO are. The issue here, though, is that deterrence is about communication deterrence, and we've certainly seen the rhetoric of the president degrade the communication of the alliance as a sort of functioning working core. So I think there's a real, I think potentially it presents an opportunity. It presents an opportunity for Europe to really bolster defense spending and its resilience in itself. And that, of course, is to to US advantage as well, because a stronger Europe is a stronger alliance. So it presents an opportunity. But I think there's a lot of work to be done now. And we've seen that NATO are working very hard. We've seen the senior NATO politicians and ministers are in the region as well to demonstrate their commitment to the region. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. But I think probably there is the opportunity to bolster the alliance now on the back of this. And of course, there's one thing to be drawn from sort of the rhetoric and that sort of senior level of communication. Behind the scenes, there is still an incredibly close alliance, including relationships within the alliance with the US as well.
Right, sir. And the ceasefire talks and the peace talks are supposed to be held in Islamabad this Friday. How do you assess this, sir? Like, how fragile is the current ceasefire situation, given Iran is saying Lebanon is also included in the ceasefire proposal, while the US denies that? So how do you see this going ahead, sir?
Yeah, I mean, I think any the resolution of any conflict at this level and the negotiations that follow are always going to be sensitive. It's really easy to be critical of where we are today. I think they're incredibly sensitive. I think those negotiations have always been incredibly sensitive, and the Iranians will drive a very hard bargain. I think they're known for that. But I think that the most important thing we've got here is we've established dialogue, and I think from there and the sensitivities surrounding the various kind of challenges that those negotiations will have to deal with now, the most important thing is we're actually at the point at which there is communication backwards and forwards through intermediaries as well. So I think that's a reason to be positive at the moment.
Absolutely, sir. And going ahead, how do you see the Strait of Hormuz taking shape? Because Iran has reportedly released a map as well as to how the vessels will go through it. So how do you see this going ahead, sir?
Yeah, I think my hope will be that what we'll see negotiated is a return to transit passage in accordance with the United Nations Convention of Law at the Sea. This is an international strait, and it's not for one adjoining nation to control the state in any way, shape, or form. It should be open, and passage should not be hindered or suspended. So I think that's the ultimate end state we should be reaching. But what we have seen is we've seen Iran's Port and Maritime Organization place a hazard area over the Straits of Hormuz. It's going to be really difficult to see how you can reassure the merchant community that the standard route through the strait is something that they would want to choose to do now. And the Iranians have proposed something which looks like it pushes all shipping into their sphere of influence that goes north of that hazard area. It's going to be a real challenge. And part of the negotiation, I think, will be challenging that position, but also enabling forces to get back into the strait, to conduct mine clearance operations if necessary, or at least to provide confidence to the merchant traffic that you can go through there. So I think it's far from clear how you can get from where we are today to where we need to be in the future. I think it's going to be one of the biggest challenges because I think Iran's going to be reluctant to sort of take its hand off that lever.
Right. So just last two questions. A, what do you expect out of this ceasefire talks that are going to be taking place? And B, in case these talks fail, as have been in the previous attempts, do you see this conflict getting more wider and spiraling out of the region?
I think I think I would go in my aspiration would be that talks continue. I think that's the most important thing is that actually you can end up in a position where even if you don't reach a full agreement or even close to a full agreement in 2 weeks, if you can keep talking, that's the critical thing. Because while we're talking, hopefully what we're not that ceasefire holds in some way, shape, or form. What that looks like long term is a real challenge, and it isn't really something that I or anyone else can look at with any great confidence at the moment. My hope is that opening up those sort of the routes of communication are going to be able to unpick a number of those problems, and we can find a compromise. I think there are some key negotiators that sit and support those negotiations. I certainly hope that we don't see this spiraling out of control and beyond the region. It hasn't thus far, and so there's no reason to think that we should see it spiraling out of control any further than we'd say it already has been.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your time and insights, sir. I'm sure this would give our audience a lot of clarity. Thanks for joining in.
Thank you very much.